Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. The Calling. Episode 4. I climbed onto the ladder, pushed open the door, and peered inside into the pitch blackness. I pulled back and looked down at Tori. Ray had a flashlight. We need to get it. An exasperated sigh. Where is it? I don't know. I thought you'd. Why would I know where they keep flashlights? Do you think I sneak around at night? Read dirty books under the covers? Just go. She stopped, lips curving in a mocking smile. Oh, that's right. You're afraid of the dark, aren't you? Where did you hear? She plucked at my pant leg. Get down, little girl. I'll lead the way, and fend off all the nasty ghosts. No, I've got it. Just give me a sec so my eyes adjust. Where was Ray and her matches when you needed them? Wait. Matches. She'd thrown them in here. I felt around, but the dark earth floor camouflaged the matchbook. Hello. Tori said. Petrified with fear already? Move or get out of my way. I started forward. Head left, Tori said as she crawled in behind me. It's about halfway to the wall. We'd gone around 20 feet when she said, swing right. See that pillar? I squinted and could make out a support post. It's right behind that. I crawled to the pillar and started feeling around the base of it. Behind, not beside. Can't you do anything? Here, let me. She reached for my arm, hand wrapping around my forearm and yanking me off balance. Hey! I said. That hurts. Her fingers dug in harder. When I tried to wrench back, she kneed me in the stomach, and I doubled over. Do you know how much trouble you got me in, Chloe? You come here, get Liz sent away, steal Simon, ruin my chance to get out. Well, you're about to get out yourself. A one-way ticket to the loony bin. Let's see just how scared of the dark you really are. She lifted a ragged rectangle. A broken brick? She swung. Pain exploded in the back of my head and I pitched forward, tasting dirt before everything went black. Several times I woke, groggy, some deeper part of me screaming, you have to get up, before the sleepy, confused part muttered, it's just the pills again, and I drifted back into unconsciousness. Finally I remembered I wasn't taking the pills and I did wake. To the sound of labored breathing. I lay there, my brain still fuddled, heart racing, as I tried to call who's there. But my lips wouldn't move. I rocked wildly, unable to get up, unable to move my arms, scarcely able to breathe. Then, as I struggled to inhale, I realized where the sound of heavy breathing came from. Me. I forced myself to lay still, to calm down. Something was tight across my cheeks, pulling the skin when I moved. Tape. I had tape over my mouth. My hands were tied behind my back, and my legs. I squinted into the dark, trying to see my feet, but with the door closed and no light coming in, I couldn't see anything. When I moved my legs, I could feel something holding them together near the ankles. Tied. That crazy. I never thought I'd call someone that, but with Tori, no other word fit. She hadn't just lured me into the crawl space and knocked me out. She'd bound and gagged me. She was nuts. Absolutely nuts. Well, that's why she's locked up in this place. Mentally disturbed. Read the label, Chloe. You forgot. Now I was stuck here, gagged and bound in the dark, waiting for someone to find me. Will anyone find you? Of course. They wouldn't just leave me here to rot. You've probably been unconscious for hours. Maybe they've stopped looking. Maybe they think you've run away. It didn't matter. Once Toride had her fun and her revenge, she'd find a way to let someone know where I was. Will she? She's crazy, remember? All she cares about is getting rid of you. Maybe she'll decide it's better if you're never found. A few days without water. Stop that. They'll think someone broke in. Tied poor Chloe up and left her in the crawl space. That would make a good story. Chloe's last story. Ridiculous. They'd find me. Eventually. But I wasn't going to lie here and wait for rescue. I flipped onto my back and tried using my hands to push myself up. When I couldn't get a grip, I rolled onto my side, then twisted and squirmed until I was on my knees. There. At least I could inch forward. If I could make it to the other side of the crawl space, I could bang on the door, get someone's attention. It would be slow going, but... Chloe. A man's voice. Dr. Davidoff? I tried to answer, but could only make a muffled sound. Your name? Chloe. As the voice drew near, and I recognized it, the hairs on my arms went up. The basement ghost. I braced myself and looked around, knowing even as I did that I couldn't see anything in this blackness. This complete dark. Relax, come for you. I shifted forward and smacked nose first into a post. Pain exploded behind my eyes and they filled with tears. When I lowered my head, wincing, I smacked my skull into the post, and toppled sideways. Get up. What's the use? I can barely move. I can't see where I'm going. It's so dark. I lifted my head but, of course, saw nothing. Ghosts could be all around me, everywhere. Oh, stop that. They're ghosts. They can't do anything to you. They can't come for you. Summon them, you must. I closed my eyes and concentrated on breathing. Nothing but breathing, blocking that voice. Help you, listen, this house. As terrified as I was, the moment I heard the words "this house" spoken with such urgency, I had to listen. Good, relax, concentrate. I struggled against my bonds, trying to push myself up. No, relax, come for you, use the time, make contact. I can't, must get, their story, urgent. I strained to pick up more, struggling to understand. Relax and concentrate? Sounded like what Ray suggested. It had worked when I was with her, at least enough for me to see a flash. I closed my eyes. Good, relax, summon. I squeezed my eyes shut and imagined myself making contact with him. Pictured him. Visualized pulling him through. Strained until my temples began to throb. Child, not so. His voice was louder. I balled up my hands, willing myself to pass through the barrier, to contact the dead. No, the ghost said. Don't. My head jerked up, eyes flying open to blackness. Are you there? I thought the words, then tried saying them, an against the gag. I ticked off 2 minutes of complete quiet. So much for pulling the ghost through. I must have shoved him farther out of reach. At least the interlude gave me a moment to calm down. My heart had stopped its scared rabbit pattering, and even the dark didn't seem so bad. If I could inch toward the door and bang on it. And what direction is the door? I'd just have to find out. I started toward a sliver of light that probably came from around the door. The ground trembled, and I pitched forward. As I straightened, the bindings around my hands moved, loosening. I twisted my arms, pulling my wrists apart. Whatever knot Tori had tied was poorly done, and slipping. Rich girls, I thought. That's what Ray would say. I worked my hands free. When I reached for my legs, the tremor came again, stronger now, and I had to brace myself to keep from falling over. An earthquake? With my luck, I wouldn't doubt it. I waited it out, then started fumbling with the rope around my feet. It was twisted and knotted in several places, as if it had knots before Tori found it. Finding the right knot, in the dark was. A crunch cut my thought short. It sounded like someone stepping onto the dirt floor. But ghosts didn't make any noise when they moved. I listened. It came again, a shifting, crackling sound, like someone dropping a handful of pebble-filled dirt. I swallowed and kept working on the knot. What if there's a real person down here with me? Someone who could hurt me? A scraping noise behind me. I jumped, wrenching my side. The gag stifled my yelp, and I searched the darkness, heart pounding so loud I swore I could hear it. Thump thump thump. That's not my heartbeat. The sound came from my left, too soft to be footsteps. Like someone's hands hitting the dirt. Like someone crawling toward me. Stop that. I only meant to think the words, but I heard them rip from my raw throat, muffled by the gag. The thumping stopped. A guttural noise, like a growl. My God, there isn't someone down here, there's something, some animal. A mole. Ray and I had seen a dead mole yesterday. A mole? Growling? Making a thumping loud enough to be heard across the room? Just stay still. If you stay still, it can't find you. That's sharks. Sharks and dinosaurs can't find you if you stay still. This isn't Jurassic Park. Hysterical laughter bubbled up in my throat. I swallowed it, twisting the sound into a whimper. The thumping grew louder, closer, underscored now by a new noise. A clicking. Click clack click clack. What was that? Are you going to sit here and find out? I reached for my gag but I couldn't get a grip on the tape, so I gave up and fumbled for the rope around my feet again, fingertips whizzing along it so fast it cut into my skin. At every knot, I felt for loose ends and, finding none, kept going until. There it was. A loose end. I worked at the knot, tugging this bit, then that bit, searching for the one that would yank out an end. I put all my concentration into it, blocking the sounds. I was trying to get my fingers under a section of knot when something rattled right beside me. A rustle, then a click-clack. A thick musty smell filled my nostrils. Then icy fingertips brushed my bare arm. Something in me just let go. A small rush of wetness trickled down my leg, but I barely noticed. I sat there, frozen, holding myself so still and tight that my jaw started to ache. I tracked the thumping, rustling, clicking thing as it seemed to circle me. Another sound rose. A long low whimper. My whimper. I tried to stop it, but couldn't, could only huddle there, so terrified my mind was an absolute blank. Then it touched me again. Long, dry, cold, finger-like things tickled across the back of my neck. An indescribable smacking, cracking, rustling sound set my every hair on end. The sound repeated until it became not a sound but a word. A horrible mangled word that couldn't come from any human throat, a single word endlessly repeated. Help! 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 I lunged forward, away from the thing. Ankles still tied, I flopped face first to the floor, then pushed up on all fours, moving as fast as I could to that distant door. A hissing, thumping, clicking sound came from my other side. Another one. Oh God, what were they? How many were there? It doesn't matter. Just go. I dragged myself until I was at the door. My fingertips brushed the wood. I pushed. It didn't budge. Locked. I backed up and slammed my fists against it, screaming, banging, calling for help. Cold fingers wrapped around my bare ankle. 28. My hand brushed something lying in the dirt. The matchbook. I snatched it up and fumbled with the cover. I pulled out a match, then turned the book over, fingers searching for the strike strip. There. Help. Help. Me. I backpedaled, shimmying and kicking my bound feet to get away, match falling. I stopped, and ran my hand over the dirt, searching for it. Get another one. I did. Found the strike strip again. Pinched the match between my fingers and realized that I had no idea how to light it. Why would I? At camp, only counselors started fires. I'd never smoked a cigarette. I didn't share other girls' fascination with candles. You must have done this before. Probably, but I didn't remember. Who cares? You've seen it in movies, haven't you? How hard can it be? I pinched the match again, struck it, and it folded on impact. I pulled out another. How many were there? Not many. It was the same pack Ray had used the first day I'd caught her lighting matches. This time, I held the match lower, near the head. I struck it. Nothing. I struck again and the match head flared, singeing my fingertips, but I didn't let go. The flame burned bright, but gave off very little light. I could see my hand, but beyond that darkness. No, there was something to the right, moving on the dirt. I could make out only a dark shape, dragging itself toward me. Big and long. Something reached out. It looked like an arm, splotchy, the hand almost white, long fingers glowing against the earth. The hands reached forward, clawing the dirt, then pulling the body along. I could see clothes, ripped clothing. The smell of dirt and something dank filled my nostrils. I lifted the match higher. The thing raised its head. A skull stared at me, strips of blackened flesh and dirty encrusted hair hanging from it. Empty eye sockets turned my way. The jaw opened, teeth clacking as it tried to speak, uttering only that horrible, guttural groan. Help! Help me! I screamed into the gag so loud I thought my head would explode. Anything left in my bladder gave way. I dropped the match. It sputtered on the ground, then went out, but not before I saw a bony hand reaching for my leg and a second corpse slithering up beside the first. For a second, I just sat there, nearly convulsing with fear, my screams little more than rasps. Then that hand wrapped around my leg, cold bone biting in, scraps of ragged cloth brushing my bare skin. Even if I couldn't see it, I could visualize it, and that image was enough to stop the screams in my throat and jolt me back to life. I yanked free, kicking, shuddering as my foot made contact, and I heard a dry, snapping sound. As I scuttled away, I heard someone saying my name, telling me to stop. I tried to pull the gag off, but my shaking fingers still couldn't find an edge. I gave up, crawling as fast as I could, until the thumps and clicks and enraged hisses grew distant. Chloe! Stop! A dark shape loomed above me, illuminated by a dim light. It's... I kicked as hard as I could. A sharp hiss of pain and a curse. Chloe. Fingers clamped down on my arm. I swung. Another hand grabbed that arm, and yanked me off balance. Chloe, it's me. Derek. I don't know what I did next. I think I might have collapsed into his arms, but if I did, I prefer not to remember it that way. I do remember feeling the gag rip away, then hearing that awful thump-thump and scrambling up. There's dead people, I know. They must have been buried down here. You accidentally raised them. Are raised? Later. Right now, you need to. The thumping sounded again, and I could see them in my mind pulling their limp bodies along. The rustle of their clothing and dried flesh. The clatter and clicks of their bones. Their spirits trapped inside. Trapped in their corpses. Chloe, focus. Derek grabbed my forearms, holding me still, pulling me close enough to see the white flash of his teeth as he talked. From behind him came that faint light I'd seen earlier. The door had been left open, letting in just enough light to make out shapes. They won't hurt you. They aren't brain-eating movie zombies, okay? They're just dead bodies with their spirits returned to them. Just dead bodies? With their spirits returned to them? I'd sent people ghosts back into their corpses. I thought of what that would be like, shoved back into your decomposed body, trapped there. I need to send them back. Yeah, that'd be the general idea. Strain sapped the sarcasm from his words, and when I stopped shaking, I could feel the tension running through him, vibrating through the hands gripping my arms, and I knew he was struggling to stay calm. I rubbed my hands over my face, the stink of dirt filling my nostrils. Oh okay, so how do I send them back? Silence. I looked up. Derek. I don't know. He shook it off, rolling his shoulders, the gruffness returning to his voice. You summoned them, Chloe. Whatever you did, undo it. Reverse it. I didn't do. Just try. I closed my eyes. Go back. Back to your afterlife. I release you. I repeated the words, concentrating so hard sweat trickled down my face. But the thumping kept coming. Closer. Closer. I closed my eyes and made myself a movie, starring a foolish young necromancer who needs to send spirits back to the netherworld. I forced myself to picture the corpses. I saw myself calling to their ghosts, freeing them of their earthly bonds. I imagined their spirits lifting. Help! Help! My throat went dry. The voice was right behind me. I opened my eyes. Derek let out an oath and his hands tightened around my forearms. Keep your eyes closed, Chloe. Just remember, they won't hurt you. A bony fingertip touched my elbow. I jumped. It's okay, Chloe. I'm right here. Keep going. As I held myself still, the fingertips poked my arm, then slid along it, stroking, testing, feeling, like the blind man with the elephant. Bone scraped over my skin. A rustling clatter as the corpse pulled itself closer. The smell of it. Visualize. I am. Not like that. I closed my eyes meaningless since I could see nothing with them open, but it made me feel better. The fingers crept and poked over my back, plucking my shirt, the corpse making ga-ga-ga noises as if trying to talk. I gritted my teeth and blocked it out. Not easy, knowing what was touching me, pressing up against my side. Enough already. I concentrated instead on Derek's breathing. Slow, deep breaths through his mouth, as he struggled to stay calm. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Find a quiet spot. The creative place. Slowly the sounds and touches and smells of the real world faded. I squeezed my eyes shut, and let myself free fall into my imagination. I focused on the bodies, imagining myself tugging out their spirits, setting them free, like caged doves, winging their way into the sunlight. I repeated the images freeing the spirits, wishing them well, apologizing as I sent them on their way. Dimly I heard Derek's voice, telling me I was doing fine, but it seemed to float, dreamlike on the edge of consciousness. The real world was here, where I was undoing my mistake, reversing They're gone, Chloe, he whispered. I stopped. I could still feel bony fingers, now on my leg, a body resting against mine, but it wasn't moving. When I twisted sideways, the corpse fell, an empty shell, collapsing at my feet. Derek let out a long, deep breath, running his hands through his hair. After a moment, he asked, as if in afterthought, whether I was okay. I'll live. Another shuddering deep breath. Then he looked at the body. Guess we've got some work to do. 29. By work, he meant cleanup. As in, reburying the bodies. All I'll say about that is that I was glad even with the door open it was still too dark to see those corpses very well. The graves were shallow, barely more than a few inches of dirt over the bodies, enough for them to claw through when their spirits were slammed back into their corpses. But I didn't want to think about that. I could tell the bodies had been buried quite a while, probably before Lyle House had become a group home. And they were adults. For now, that was all I needed to know. As we worked, I asked Derek how he'd found me. He said that when he realized Tori had stayed behind, he knew she was up to something, so he went to check on me. How exactly he found me, he didn't say, only shrugged and mumbled something about checking the obvious places when I seemed to be missing. The question now was, what to do about Tori? Nothing, I said, wiping my trembling hands after smoothing over the second grave. Hey! Nice to hear him say that for a change. I'm going to act like nothing happened. He considered it, then nodded. Yeah. If you blame her, things will only escalate. Better to ignore her and hope she gives up. Pray she gives up, I muttered as I crawled for the door. Is there still clean clothing down here? Derek asked. One load in the dryer. That's it. Why? Oh, right. Better not to go upstairs covered in dirt. I climbed down the ladder. Most of what's in the dryer was yours, so. Chloe? Derek. Mrs. Talbot stood in the laundry room. What are you two doing together? Derek, you know you're not supposed to. Her gaze traveled over my filthy clothing. Dear Lord, what happened to you? There was no sense denying we'd been in the crawl space, since she caught us stepping from the closet, me caked in dirt. I moved my legs together, hoping it hid the wet mark. The blow to the back of my skull throbbed and I struggled to speak, praying Derek would jump in. He didn't. One rescue a day must have been his limit. I was doing laundry, and Derek came down, looking for. Dr. Gill stepped into the room. My gaze shot to her. Go on, Chloe. He wanted his shirt. I asked about stain stud, because I couldn't find any and I opened the closet to look, and Derek said it was usually locked. We found the ladder and the crawl SP space and we were curious. Oh, I bet you were curious, Dr. Gill said, crossing her arms. Kids your age are very curious, aren't they? I guess so. We were exploring. I bet you were, Dr. Gill cut in. I realized what she thought Derek and I had been doing. Even as I denied it, I saw she'd given us the perfect out. If I just dropped my gaze sheepishly and said yep, you caught us, they'd have their explanation, with no reason to go into the crawl space and discover those hastily reburied corpses. If it had been Simon, I'd have done it in a second. But Derek? I wasn't that good a liar. It didn't matter. The more I denied it, the more certain they were that we'd been fooling around. Dr. Gill had already made up her mind. If you find a teenage boy and girl in a dark, private place, was there really any question what they'd been up to? Even Mrs. Talbot seemed convinced, her mouth tight with disapproval as I blathered. And Derek? He didn't say a word. Once we were released, I hurried upstairs to change my jeans before anyone noticed the P mark. When I checked my head, I had 2 goose eggs, one from Tori and one from hitting that pillar. Back downstairs, I showed the smaller one to Dr. Gill, hoping it would support my story that we'd been exploring. I even bopped my head. She just took a cursory look, handed me Tylenol, and told me to lie down in the media room. Aunt Lauren was on the way. I don't know what to say, Chloe. Aunt Lauren's voice was barely above a whisper. These were the first words she'd said to me since arriving at Lyle House. I'd heard her arguing with Dr. Gill and the nurses earlier, demanding to know why they weren't making sure Derek stayed away from me, as she'd been promised. But now, with me, that anger had disappeared. We were alone in Dr. Gill's office. Just like Tori and her mother had been. While I knew this meeting wouldn't end in threats and bruises, I imagined I'd leave feeling no better than Tori had. Aunt Lauren sat ramrod straight, her hands cupped in her lap, fingers twisting her emerald ring. I know you're 15. Even if you haven't really dated yet, you're curious. In a place like this, isolated from your friends and family, living with boys, the temptation to experiment. It wasn't like that. It wasn't anything like that. I twisted to face her. We found the crawl space and Derek wanted to check it out and I thought that'd be cool. So you followed him in there? After what he'd done to you? She'd gone still, the disappointment in her eyes changing to horror. Oh, Chloe, I can't believe. Did you think harassing and hurting you the other day meant he liked you? What? No, of course not. Derek isn't. He made a mistake. He didn't really hurt me and he didn't mean to do it. It was a misunderstanding. She reached forward and gripped my hand. Oh, Chloe. Sweetheart, no. You can't fall for that. You can't make excuses for him. Excuses? Maybe this is the first boy who's ever said I like you, and I know that feels good, but this will not be the only boy who likes you, Chloe. He's just the first with the nerve to say so. He's older. He took advantage of the situation. At school, I imagine girls won't look at him twice, and here he is, with a pretty girl, young, impressionable, trapped. Aunt Lauren. I yanked from her grasp. God, it's not. You can do better, Chloe. Much better. From the distaste on her face, I knew she wasn't talking about how Derek treated me. I felt an odd surge of outrage. Sure, I couldn't bring myself to pretend that I'd been fooling around with him. But I'd felt bad about thinking that way. How Derek looked wasn't his fault. He was obviously aware of it and how others reacted to it, and it certainly wasn't like he tried to be repulsive. An adult should know better. Aunt Lauren should be the one giving me the "you can't judge a book by its cover" speech. Any notion I'd had of confessing the truth to Aunt Lauren evaporated. She looked at Derek and she saw a creep who'd attacked her niece. Nothing I could say would convince her otherwise, because he seemed like a creep. And nothing I could say would convince her I was really seeing ghosts, because I seemed like a schizophrenic. Aren't you going to say anything, Chloe? Why? I heard the chill in my voice. I've tried. You've already made up your mind. She shifted in her seat, inching to the edge, closing the gap between us. I'd like to hear your side. Just because I'm in this place, just because I'm sick, doesn't mean I'm any different than I was a week ago. Back then, you'd know something was wrong with this story. You'd have asked for my explanation before accusing me of anything. But now, I stood. Now I'm just the crazy girl. Chloe, I don't think. I know exactly what you think, I said, and walked out. Aunt Lauren tried to follow, but I wouldn't listen. I was too angry. Too hurt. To think I'd fool around in a basement crawl space with the first boy who showed an interest in me? That really stung. God only knew what she thought we'd been doing. I was pretty sure her imagination had taken her way past the sweet first kiss stage. To think I'd go from never been on a date to rolling around in the dirt with a stranger? That was insulting. No, more than insulting. It made me furious. Did Aunt Lauren know the first thing about me? And if she didn't, who did? When it was clear I wasn't going to calm down and talk to my aunt, it was time for the next phase. The trial. I was summoned back into the office, with Derek as my co-defendant and Dr. Gill and Dr. Davidoff as judge and jury. It was a closed court. Even Aunt Lauren wasn't allowed in. I didn't bother to argue about why we'd been in the crawl space. I'd moved well past the "oh, my God, I don't want anyone to think I'm that kind of girl" stage. If they thought Derek and I had been grappling in the dirt, then at least it meant they wouldn't go into the crawl space and see the signs of disturbance, or, if they did, they'd figure they knew what caused it. Despite what Aunt Lauren believed, I was sure Derek was as horrified by the thought as I was. When Dr. Gill tried to get a confession from him, he only shrugged, and muttered whatever, arms crossed, big frame slumped in his seat, defiance in the set of his chin. Like me, he'd realized there was no use arguing, but he wasn't about to confess either. "This isn't the first time you two have tangled," Dr. Gill said finally. "And I have a feeling it won't be the last. We need to nip this in the bud, and the only way we're going to do that is with a transfer. One of you will have to go." "I will." I heard the words and it took a moment to realize they'd come from me. Was I crazy? Volunteering to be transferred when I was already worried about what such a transfer meant? But I didn't take it back. If one of us had to leave, it should be me. As frightened as I was of being shipped out, I wouldn't separate Simon and Derek. Still, I expected Derek to jump in. I don't know why, certainly not chivalry. But, it seemed only right to at least raise a token protest. The polite thing to do, which I supposed should explain why he didn't say a word. "No one's going anywhere," Dr. Davidoff said softly. "For now, I'm putting you both on notice. But don't give me any reason to revisit this discussion. Is that understood?" It was. 30. When the doctors dismissed us, Derek and I headed into the hall together. I tried to dawdle, fussing with an imaginary spot on my shirt and giving him time to walk ahead, avoiding any awkwardness. He parked himself in front of me, arms crossed, fingers wrapping his biceps with impatience. I reminded myself of how he'd rescued me. I should be grateful. I was. Right then, though. I don't know. My head hurt and I was still smarting over my aunt's rejection, and when I'd offered to be sent away and he didn't argue, it stung. I didn't want it to. But it did. "What are you wiping at?" he whispered finally. "A spot." "There's no spot." I straightened, tugging my shirt down and adjusting it. "That's because I fixed it." I tried to step past him. He didn't budge. "We need to talk," he whispered. "Do you really think that's a good idea?" "Simon'll be there," he said. 5 minutes. Out back. I really didn't think it was wise for me to be seen hanging out with Derek, even if Simon was there. So 5 minutes later, I was in the media room, lying on the love seat, listening to my iPod, trying to lose myself in my music. When a shadow passed over my head, I jumped up. Ray stood there, hands out. "Down, girl. It's just me." I pulled out my earbuds. She draped her sweatshirt over a chair. "So what happened?" "Not what everyone thinks." "Well, duh." She settled in at the other end, feet pulled up under her, throw pillow on her lap, getting comfortable, waiting for the real story. She'd known me less than a week, and she knew I hadn't been fooling around in a crawl space with Derek. "I'll tell you later," I murmured, "when we're in our room." "But you will tell me, right?" I nodded. "Good. So, how'd it go?" I told her about the meeting with the doctors and about Aunt Lauren. It's one thing when strangers think you'd do stuff you wouldn't. They don't know you. But when it's someone who should. Someone you thought did. I shook my head. "Yeah, I've had my share of that. At school, if I did anything wrong, I got hauled into the counselor, who lectured me on the temptations of the street and the importance of staying in school. It's like, excuse me? Is there anything in my record that says I've ever been near a gang? Or that I don't think school's important? I get straight BS, and I never skip class go lecture someone else." She hugged the pillow to her chest. "I tell myself that's cool, they don't know me. But I get the same crap from my mom. Every time we get into it, she reminds me about my friend Trina. Ran away at 14, got mixed up in a gang, and killed in a drive-by shooting. Hello? What does that have to do with me? There's a reason Trina and I weren't friends anymore. I'm not like that. They mean well, I guess. But it stings." The worst of it, her gaze rose above my head. "What do you want?" Derek circled in front of me and tapped his watch. "Did I say 5 minutes?" "Yes, you did. And I said it wasn't a good idea. We need to talk to you." Ray started to rise. "Should I get the nurses?" I waved her down, then turned to Derek. "No." He pushed his hands into his jean pockets, rocked back on his heels, then said, "Simon wants to talk to you." "Does Simon have feet?" Ray asked. "A mouth? What are you? His faithful Saint Bernard, lumbering around, bearing your master's messages." He swiveled, putting his back to Ray. "Chloe." There was a note of pleading in his voice that made my resolve falter. "Chloe, PL." He held the L, stretching it, and for a second, I thought he was actually going to say please, and if he had, I'd have given in, despite my reservations about being seen together. But after a second, he snipped the syllable off and stalked out. "Bye." Ray called after him. "Always a pleasure chatting with you." She turned to me. "You are going to tell me what all this is about, right?" "I promise." "So how did swimming go?" "Okay, I guess. Nice to get out, but not much fun." Simon swam laps, I can barely dog paddle, so we went our separate ways. Nothing new there. They have a cool slide, though, and... She looked behind me again and offered a cautious nod. "Hey," Simon said. He perched on the love seat arm. I moved over to give him room, but Ray was on the other side, so I couldn't go far, and his hip brushed my shoulder. I began. Don't want to go outside, he finished for me. That's cool. We can both hide out from Derek in here, see how long it takes him to find us. I'll leave you two, Ray began, pushing up from the sofa. No, stay, Simon said. I didn't mean to butt in. You didn't. I hear chores calling my name, though, so I'll take off. When she was gone, I moved over. Simon slid down beside me. I gave him plenty of room, but he stayed close, not touching but almost, and I gazed at the gap between us, that scant inch of bare sofa, staring at it because, well, I didn't know what else to do, to say. The horror in the crawl space had been hovering over my head, cushioned by the shock and confusion and stress of dealing with the doctors and Aunt Lauren, but now that cushion began to sag, the weight sliding down, the memories returning. I feel awful, he said. About Tori. I knew she was mad about seeing us together, so I tried setting her straight, but I think I only made it worse. It's not your fault. She has problems. A small, sharp laugh. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. After a minute, he glanced over at me. You okay? I nodded. He leaned over, his shoulder rubbing mine, breath warm against my ear. If it was me, I wouldn't be okay. I'd have been scared out of my mind. I dipped my head, and a strand of my hair fell forward. He reached over with his free hand, as if to brush it back, then stopped. He cleared his throat, but didn't say anything. It was pretty interesting, I said after a moment. I bet. The kind of thing that's really cool in the movies, but in real life, our eyes met. Not so much, hey. I nodded. Not so much. He twisted, backing into the corner of the couch. So, what's your favorite zombie movie? I sputtered a laugh, and as it bubbled up, the weight eased. I felt my thoughts shift, settling into a place where I could make some sense of them. I'd been trying to forget what happened, to push past it, be strong, be tough, be like Derek. Raising the dead? No biggie. Send em back, bury the bodies, next problem please. But I couldn't do it. I kept seeing them, smelling them, feeling their touch. My gut kept seizing up with remembered horror, then thinking about what I'd done to them, their horror. The best way for me to handle it right now was to get some distance. Don't forget it just shifted aside with safe images of celluloid. So we talked about zombie movies, debating and discussing the merits of films that, according to the ratings board, neither of us should have seen. It has the best special effects, Simon said, hands down. Sure, if you make enough things blow up, you can hide plot holes big enough to drive a truck through. Plot? It's a zombie movie. He was now sprawled on the floor, having moved there to straight a particularly lame zombie death scene. I lay on the couch, looking down at him. Let me guess, he said. You're going to write the world's first art house zombie movie to premiere at sundown. Sundance. And, no. If I ever have to direct any art house film. I shuddered. Shoot me now. He grinned and sat up. I'll second that. No art flicks for me. Not that I'm going to ever write or direct any film. So which is it you want to do? Write or direct? Both if I can. Screenwriting's where the story's at, but if you want to see that story come to life, you've got to direct, because in Hollywood, the director is king. Screenwriters? Barely even register on the radar. So the director is at the top of the heap. No, that's the studio. The director is king. The studio is God. And they just want something they can sell, something that'll fit their 4 little quadrants. Quadrants. The 4 main demographic groups. Guys and girls, divided by young and old. Hit all 4, and you've got a blockbuster, and a very happy studio. That is not, however, going to happen with a zombie movie, however cool it is. He flipped onto his stomach. How do you know all this? I might be stuck in Buffalo, but I'm wired. I subscribe to Variety, creative screenwriting, a whack of industry loops, bookmark the blogs. If I want to be in this business, I have to know this business. The sooner the better. Oh, man. I don't even know what I want to be yet. I can hire you to do all my fog effects. He laughed, then looked behind me. Hey, bro. Get enough fresh air. I wanted to talk to you. Derek swung his glare to include me. Both of you. Then pull up a chair. The current topic of conversation is zombie movies. Simon glanced at me. Are we still on zombie movies? I think so. Zombie movies. Derek said, slowly, as if he'd misheard. His face darkened and he lowered his voice. Have you two forgotten what happened today? Nope. That's why we're talking about it. Simon tossed a grin my way. Kinda. Derek lowered his voice another notch. Chloe is in danger. Serious danger. And you're lounging around, yapping about zombie movies. Lounging? Yapping? Good word choices. Very evocative. You making a point? I know perfectly well what happened and what it could mean for Chloe. But the sky isn't going to fall if we don't discuss it this very minute, Chicken Little. He stretched. Right now, I think we could all use some time to just chill. Chill? You do a lot of that, don't you? Derek walked over to Simon. In fact, that's pretty much all you do. I stood. I'd better see if Ray needs help. With her chores. Simon sat. Hold up. We're almost done here. He turned to Derek. Right. Sure. Go ahead. Take it easy. I'm sure Dad will walk in that door any minute and rescue us. And if he's in trouble? If he needs help? Well, too bad, 'cause that would require effort and you're too busy, chilling. Simon sprang to his feet. Derek stood his ground. They faced off for a moment, then Simon nudged me toward the door. Let's go. When I hesitated, he mouthed please. I nodded and we left. 31. As we walked down the hall, I glanced at Simon. His face was hard, expressionless. When he caught me looking, he managed a smile as if to reassure me he wasn't mad at me. Mrs. Talbot, he called. Can I go out back? Shoot some hoops before dark. Of course, dear. We waited at the door. She stepped from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel, and punched in the security code. Only then did she look over and realize Simon wasn't alone. Oh, Chloe. I'm not sure you two should. It's basketball, Mrs. Talbot. He pushed open the screen door and held it for me. You can watch from the window if you need to. Just don't go anywhere I can't see you. He slammed the screen door shut behind us and marched into the yard so fast I had to jog to keep up. I glanced over my shoulder. The door was closed, no sign of Mrs. Talbot. He looked around. You see the ball? I think it's in the shed. I'll go get. He touched my elbow. No. Unless you really want to play. I shook my head and he led me toward the stone bench near the central garden. Talbot can still see us from there. He exhaled. Derek sure knows how to push my buttons. Worst of it, I know he's pushing my buttons, trying to get a rise out of me, and I rise anyway. Stupid, stupid, stupid. For a moment, he said nothing, gaze moving across the yard. Derek wants me to go looking for our dad. How? Like, break out? You can't. That's no big deal. He settled back on the bench. When you're raised like us, as supernaturals, it's different. The rules are different. They have to be. If there's trouble, you have to run. But you don't want to go. Oh, I want to. I've been chomping at the bit since we got here. My dad's out there somewhere, maybe in trouble, and I'm sitting around in a group home? Going to class? Hanging with Derek? Acting like nothing's wrong? It's killing me, Chloe. Derek knows how bad I want out. Like I said, he's pushing my buttons. Where is your dad? He shook his head. We don't know. He just things went wrong and he disappeared and we ended up here. It's a long story. Then it can wait. Thanks. Point is, he's gone, and I'm sure he didn't leave willingly. So we're stuck here, supposedly waiting to get released, but then what? Where would we go? There's no grandma or great uncle or family friend waiting to take us. We'd go into foster care and then we'd need to escape from there, so what's the point of waiting? You want out now, but you can't get out. We can get out. Derek's got a plan. A small laugh. Trust me, the man's always got a plan. But it's an escape plan for one for me. He won't go. Flat out refuses. What? He's making you feel guilty about staying when he won't go himself? Where does he get off? Yeah, I know, and I don't want to sound like I'm defending him, but he has a reason for not wanting to go. It's a stupid reason, but it's a big deal to him and there's no sense trying to change his mind. He just freaks. Freaks. Simon flexed his hand, staring down at it. It's complicated. Derek's idea, though, is for me to get out and find Dad. Dad taught me ways to get in touch with him. Spells and stuff. But I can't leave Derek. Can't. Won't, I guess. I'm worried about Dad, but he can take care of himself, way better than Derek can. I must have looked skeptical, because he went on, I know Derek seems like he can, and in most ways he can, but in others, he shook his head. It's complicated. If I take off and something goes wrong, I'm afraid he'll just let it. I don't understand. I know. He stared down at his hands. I know I'm not making any sense, but it's complicated. Yeah. But he inhaled. I'm starting to think I need to take that chance. Derek's right. Sitting on my butt isn't getting us anywhere. Now there's you to consider. You really need to get out. I do. The words escaped as a squeak. Derek's right. It doesn't matter how hard we work to hide your powers, they aren't like mine. They can't be hidden. Not when you're living under a microscope. If I get transferred to a hospital, I'll get through it. But what if it's not a transfer? He glanced over, worry in his eyes. What you said about Liz keeps gnawing at me. Maybe she is a shaman. Or if she is dead, maybe it was an accident. Why would they kill kids who don't get better? It sounds nuts, but even Derek's worried. Derek? But he said. I know what he said. But when I talked to him later, he wasn't so quick to brush it off. Even raised some questions himself. With Derek, that's as close to agreement as you can get. But you still need help. Say everything goes fine and you get released, what will you do? Who will you talk to? How will you learn how to get back to normal? Normal. Such a simple, boring word. Funny how it shone now, like a brass ring on a merry-go-round, bright with promise, just out of reach. Getting out wouldn't solve my problems. Aunt Lauren would always be watching, misinterpreting every abnormal thing I did as a sign that I needed to return to Lyle House, or worse. But to run away? I knew what Derek would say. I could even picture his expression, that scowl of disdain and frustration. I wasn't Chloe Saunders, sheltered art school girl anymore. I wasn't even Chloe Saunders, schizophrenic. If Chloe Saunders, necromancer, followed the old rules, she could wind up in a padded cell, ranting about voices no one else could hear. I wasn't naive. I read the news. I knew what happened to kids who ran away, and it wasn't the wonderful life of freedom they imagined. How long would it take to find Simon's dad? How would we live in the meantime? What would we eat? Where would we sleep? I had some money, but how long would that last? What would happen when our pictures were splashed across the news? When every cop and concerned citizen was looking for us? I could hole up here, screw my eyes shut, and pray nothing bad happened. Or I could take matters into my own hands. Take action. Getting help from Simon's missing father wasn't exactly my idea of a firm plan. But if I got out of here, I could track down Liz. That would be easy. There were a limited number of hospitals in Buffalo. And if she wasn't safe in a hospital, what did that mean for the rest of us? Were we in danger? I couldn't keep plugging my fingers in my ears and pretending everything was fine. If you're getting out of here, I'll go with you, I said. You don't have to. I just meant that I need to leave, for me and Derek and, now, for you. When I find Dad, he can help us. Who will help you? Out there. A twist of a smile. I've got my killer fog spell. You need backup. Derek would be a lot better at that, but you're going to be stuck with me. I'm going. 32. I waited in the boys' bathroom, tucked in beside the storage tower. With every noise from the hall, my heart thudded, telling me I was about to make the biggest fool of myself yet. But I wasn't wrong. Like Derek, I could add 2 plus 2 and see the answer. I wiped my sweaty palms against my jeans, glanced at my watch, and prayed I'd come to the proper conclusion. And, in some ways, prayed I hadn't. When my watch hit 8 o'clock, the bathroom door swung open. Derek flipped the light on and shut the door. As he turned toward the mirror, he saw me and he let out a yelp of surprise that would have been very satisfying under any other circumstances. Are you nuts? He hissed. What are you doing here? I walked past him and locked the door. If you want to discuss the plan, this really isn't the place, he said. He pivoted, gaze following me as I crossed to the shower and turned on the cold water, so it would drown out our conversation without steaming up the room. Great, he muttered. Now they're going to think we're showering together. Maybe we can just tell them we were washing off the crawl space dirt and trying to conserve water. I planted myself in front of him. You set me up. He opened his mouth, but, for once, nothing came out and he settled for a token scowl. All this time, I've been trying to figure out why you want to help me. Why do you care if I know I'm a necromancer? Why do you care if I get booted out? Why stick your neck out for me, like you did this afternoon? I just want. To help. Sure, you're obnoxious and arrogant, but underneath, there's a decent guy who wants to help a fellow supernatural. Yeah, right. There has to be another reason. Today I found it. Simon. He crossed his arms. Yeah, Simon wanted me to be nice to you. Okay? Can I have my shower now? Alone. You want Simon to run away. To find your dad. But he won't go without you. He needs a reason to go right now. So you gave him one. The designated damsel in distress. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but his gaze wouldn't quite meet mine. My remaining doubts vanished in a fresh surge of anger. Here I was, a real necromancer, naive and lost. Perfect bait. Just keep pushing us together, make a big deal out of how helpless I am, and eventually he'll pull on his shining armor. Great plan. But it still lacks something. Stakes. In any great thriller, your hero needs three things: goal, motivation, and stakes. Goal: find your missing dad. Motivation: help the poor necromancer chick. The stakes were missing, though. You needed to put your damsel in actual distress. What if she was about to be transferred to a real mental hospital? Where she'd be out of Simon's reach and beyond help. Or, worse, where she might die, the victim of some evil plan. So you get Tori too? No. He raised his hands, genuine shock in his eyes. I did not have anything to do with that. Even if Tori would get close enough to me to carry on a conversation which you may have noticed, she won't. I wouldn't do that. I did nothing to make them transfer you. Okay, so you just took advantage of the situation. I gave him a moment to respond. He didn't, which was all the answer I needed. When I first told you about seeing Liz, you brushed it off. But then you realized this could work in your favor, so you changed your tune with Simon. You planted the seeds of doubt, then waited for them to sprout. That's why you didn't argue when I offered to be the one transferred. That's exactly where you wanted me. You manipulated the situation and you lied. I never lied. I fixed him with a look. You really heard the doctors talking about transferring me yesterday. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I heard them talking about you and they seemed to be suggesting. Okay, you didn't lie. You exaggerated. He scowled. You are in danger. The more I think about Liz. Cut the crap, okay, Derek? You got your wish. Simon's going. I'm going with him. You're right. He needs to get out and find his father. Of course, you could have saved us all this trouble by just going with him yourself. But that might be dangerous. And he's not your father, so it's not really your problem. He shot toward me so fast I stumbled back, but managed to catch myself and stand my ground. It wasn't easy with him looming over me, eyes blazing. Is that what I think, Chloe? I locked my knees, refusing to break eye contact. I don't know what you think, Derek, I said, calmly, or so I hoped. Simon says there's a reason you won't go. A stupid reason, according to him. So maybe it's an excuse. Maybe you just don't want to bother. An excuse. A bitter laugh. Then he backed away from me slowly, as if forcing himself. You read my file, right? I know you read it that night when you and Ray pretended to be raiding the kitchen. Only because of what you did. I had to know how dangerous I was. I don't blame you. But you got your answer, right? You know exactly how dangerous I am. I swallowed. You know what I did, and you think I should be walking the streets?" His lip curled. "I'm exactly where I belong." Something in his eyes, in his voice, in his face, made the back of my throat ache. I glanced over at the shower, watching the water dapple the doors as the harsh pounding filled the silence. After a moment, I looked back at him. "You must have had a reason for doing it." "Did I?" When I tried looking away again, he sidestepped and snagged my gaze. "Is that what you want, Chloe? To hear my reason? My excuse? That the guy pulled a gun on me and if I hadn't thrown him into a wall, I'd be dead? Well, that's not how it happened. There's a kid out there who'll never walk again and I have no excuse. It's my fault. All my fault. Our dad disappearing. Simon being thrown in here. He snapped his mouth shut, hands going into his pockets as he stared out over my head, the muscles in his jaw working. After another moment, he said, "So, yeah, I want Simon out, and I'll do anything to get him out, but it's not like I'm putting you in danger. You're getting something out of it. You don't have any reason to complain." I could only stare, any sense that maybe I understood him evaporating as it always did. I'd glimpse something underneath, and he'd snatch it away so fast it left bruises that called me a fool for hoping for more. "No danger," I said slowly. "I'm running away. From the home. From my family. From my life. You'll be with Simon. Don't pretend that's any big hardship." "What? You know what I mean. A few days alone with Simon? That'll be tough. And it means a lot to him. A lot. Running away to help him find his dad? He'll never forget that." I widened my eyes. "Oh my God, do you think so? Really? That's so cool. I bet he'll ask me to go steady and everything. We can send love letters between my juvenile detention center and his, and maybe they'll let us meet at the co-ed dances." He glowered down at me. "You really think I'm stupid, don't you?" I said, then shot up my hand. "No, don't answer that. Please." Newsflash, getting a boyfriend is not at the top of every girl's priority list. Right now, it ranks about as low on mine as you can get, way below such trivial concerns as getting my life back together. All right. After this is over, I wouldn't be surprised if Simon wanted to never see me again. Just put this all behind him. You know what? That's fine. Because I need to find out what happened to Liz. And I want to help Simon because it's the right thing to do, not because I think he's so cute. I might not be a genius like you." The glower returned. "I'm not. But I'm smart enough to know this isn't going to be some grand romantic adventure. I'm running away. I'll be living on the streets. Even if we find your dad, I'm not sure he's going to be able to fix my life." I thought of Aunt Lauren and felt a pang of grief. "I'm not sure it can be fixed. So I'm supposed to be grateful to you for going." I never said. He shifted back into looming mode. "You need to get out of here just as much as Simon does, maybe more. You might not see the danger you're in, but I do. And I'm worried." "Worried? About me?" He shrugged. "Sure. Concerned. You know." He couldn't even look me in the eye when he said it. "Yeah, we need you, but I do want to help a fellow supernatural." He snuck a glance my way. "We gotta stick together. Don't you dare." "What?" His gaze broke away, started roaming the bathroom. "You're right," I said. "I do need help. My life is falling apart and maybe someday I'll look back on this as the biggest, Stupidest mistake I've ever made, but at this moment, it's the only solution I see. You need me to be your designated damsel in distress? Okay. But don't ever say you're doing this for me. This has nothing to do with me, don't you dare pretend it does. I turned and walked out. 33. I wondered whether, after our escape, I'd find time to sleep. Because I certainly hadn't been getting much at Lyle House. That night I was so exhausted I didn't even have a chance to lie there, raging about Derek or fretting about the step I was about to take. I hit the bed and fell straight into dreams of wailing police sirens and baying tracking dogs. Of a boy trapped in a hospital bed and a boy trapped in a group home and ghosts trapped in rotting corpses. Of zombies screaming for mercy and a girl screaming, "But I didn't mean it," and a boy saying, "I didn't mean it either." Doesn't matter. The dreams spun and melted together until one slid free. An image buried by the stronger, louder ones, separating and saying, "What about me?" I bolted awake and sat there, suspended in the dark, reeling in that tangled memory, the questions it raised, the answers it promised. Then I leaped from bed. I tapped at the bedroom door. "Derek." Rough snores answered. I rapped at the door again, raising my voice as loud as I dared. "Derek." My toes curled against the icy hardwood and I rubbed the goosebumps on my arms. I should have grabbed a sweater. And socks. I shouldn't even be here. I'd told the guy off, made the perfect exit, and was now creeping back, begging him to talk to me. Talk about ruining a scene. As I lifted my hand to knock, the doorknob clicked. When the door creaked open, I lifted my gaze to eye level, an apology on my lips, and found myself staring at a chest. A bare chest, and not a boy's chest. Broad and muscular, a scattering of angry red acne dots the only sign that it wasn't attached to a grown man. Around the house, Derek always wore oversized sweatshirts and baggy jeans. If I'd pictured what he looked like under them, which I hadn't, I would have guessed stocky, bordering on overweight. All that food he scarfed down had to go somewhere. And, apparently, it did just not to fat. My cheeks heated and my gaze dropped from Derek's chest, only to see he was wearing nothing but boxers. "Chloe." My gaze shot gratefully to his face. He peered at me. "Chloe? What? You owe me." "Hey." He rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger, snarled a yawn, and rolled his shoulders. "What time is it? Late? Or early? It doesn't matter. I need your help and you owe me. Get dressed and be downstairs in 5 minutes." I turned on my heel and headed for the stairs. Would Derek follow me? Probably not, considering I'd ignored his "meet me in 5 minutes" command that afternoon. I'd planned to not leave his doorway until he agreed to help me. But I hadn't expected him to be nearly naked during the conversation. It also reminded me that I was wearing only pajama pants and a tank top. When I got downstairs, I found the sweatshirt Ray had shucked in the media room earlier. I was pulling it on as I walked into the hall, and nearly smacked into Derek. He wore sweatpants and a t-shirt and had stopped in the middle of the hall, furiously scratching one bare forearm. "Fleas," I said. The joke was an admittedly lame attempt to lighten the mood from earlier, and I didn't think it deserved the glower he gave me. "Let's just get this over with," he said. "I'm not in a good mood." I could have asked how that was different from normal, but bit my tongue, motioned him into the media room and closed the door. Then I cocked my head, listening. "We're fine here," he said. "Just keep it down. Someone comes, I'll hear." I moved across the room and stopped in a patch of moonlight. When he followed, I got my first good look at him in the light. His face was pale, his cheeks flaming red, and not from the acne. Sweat plastered his hair around his face and his red-rimmed eyes glittered, struggling to focus. "You've got a fever," I said. "Maybe." He raked his hair back. "Something I ate, I guess. Or some bug you picked up." He shook his head. "I don't," he hesitated, then pushed on. "I don't get sick. Not often anyway. Part of my condition. This seems to be a reaction." He scratched his arms again. "No big deal. I'm just off. Crankier than usual," Simon would say. "You should go back to bed." "Forget this." "No, you're right. I owe you. What do you need?" I wanted to argue but could tell he'd made up his mind. "Hold on," I said, and hurried into the hall. He whispered an exasperated, "Chloe," after me, followed by a half-hearted string of profanity, as if he couldn't work up the energy to even curse properly. I returned with a glass of cold water and handed it to him, along with 4 Tylenol. "2 for now, 2 for later, in case you..." He tossed all 4 in his mouth and drained half the water. "Or you could just take them all now. I've got a high metabolism," he said. "Another part of my condition. I know a lot of girls who wouldn't mind that." He grunted something unintelligible and drained the glass. "Thanks, but," he met my gaze. "You don't need to be nice to me just because I'm not feeling great. You're mad. You've got a right to be. I used you and I made it worse by pretending I hadn't. If I were you, I wouldn't be bringing water unless it was to dump over my head." He turned away to set the empty glass on the table, and I'm glad he did, because I was pretty sure my jaw had dropped. Either that fever had gone straight to his brain or I was still asleep, dreaming, because that had sounded suspiciously like an admission of guilt. Maybe even a roundabout apology. He turned back. "Okay, so you need..." I waved him to the love seat. Annoyance flickered across his face. Getting comfortable was a distraction he couldn't be bothered with, but when I sat on the opposite chair, he lumbered to the couch. If I couldn't get him to return to bed, at least he could rest while I talked. "You know something about necromancy, right?" I began. He shrugged. "I'm no expert. But you know more than me, Simon, or anyone else I can talk to at this moment. So how do necromancers contact the dead?" "You mean like the guy in the basement? If he's there, you should see him. Then you'd just talk, like we are right now." "I mean contacting a specific person. Can I do that? Or am I restricted to those I just stumble across?" He went quiet. When he spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically soft. "If you mean your mom, Chloe." No, the word came sharper than I intended. "I haven't even thought. Well, yes, I've considered it, for someday maybe, of course I'd like to, love to." I heard myself rambling and took a deep breath. "This is connected to our situation." "You mean Liz?" "No. I should try to contact her, I guess. Just to be sure. But that's not it. Forget why I want to know." He leaned back into the sofa pillows. "If I knew why, I could answer a lot easier." Maybe, but I wasn't telling him until I had enough facts to confidently lay out my theory. "If I can contact a specific person, how would I do it?" "You can, but it's not easy and it's not guaranteed at your age. Like Simon and his spells, you're at the apprenticeship level. Where I can do things by accident, like raising the dead." "Well, no." He absently scratched his arm, the scritch-scritch filling the silence. "From what I heard, raising the dead is the toughest thing to do, and it needs this complicated ritual." He shook his head and stopped scratching. "I must have heard wrong. Like I said, I'm not an expert." "Back to how, then? How do I call up a specific ghost?" He slouched, head resting on the sofa back, staring at the ceiling before nodding, as if to himself. "If I remember right, there are two ways. You could use a personal effect. Like with a tracking dog. A small noise that sounded like a laugh. Yeah, I guess so. Or like one of those psychics you see in movies, always asking for something that belonged to the person. And the second way." I tried not to show how much I wanted this answer, how much I hoped I'd already guessed it. "You need to be at the grave." My heart hammered, and it was a moment before I could speak. "At the grave? Presuming that's where the body is buried." "It's the body that's important, not the grave site." He waved off my petty distinction, the old Derek sliding back. "Yeah, the body. The ultimate personal effect. Then I think I know what that ghost in the basement wanted." I explained how the ghost had urged me to make contact to summon them and get their story. He meant the buried bodies. That's why he wanted me to go into the crawl space. So I could get close enough to the bodies to contact those ghosts. Derek reached back to scratch between his shoulders. "Why?" "From what he seemed to say, it's about Lyle House. Something they can tell me. But those bodies have been down there way longer than Lyle House has been a group home. And if this ghost knows something, why not just tell you himself?" "I don't know," he said. I strained to remember. He seemed to be saying he couldn't make contact with them himself. Then how would he know they had anything important to tell you? Good questions. This was why I'd gone to Derek. Because he'd challenge my assumptions, show me where the holes were and what I had to learn before jumping to any conclusions. "I don't know," I said finally. "However they got there, I'm pretty sure they didn't die of natural causes." "You're probably right, and it's completely unconnected to us, and this ghost is confused, losing track of time. Or maybe he wants me to solve their murder." I stood. "But, whatever he wants me to hear, I'm going to listen. Or at least try." "Hold up." He lifted a hand, and I braced for more arguments. It was a waste of time. Dangerous, too, after we'd been caught down there earlier. And, don't forget, last time I tried to contact these ghosts, I'd returned them to their corpses. Do that again, and I'd better not call him for reburial duty. He pushed to his feet. "We should take a flashlight." "I'll grab that. You get our shoes." 34. I wasn't setting foot bare, stockinged, or shoot in that crawl space until I'd talked to the first ghost and asked all the questions Derek had raised. We went down to the laundry room. Derek took up a position at the side, leaning back against the dryer. I sat cross-legged in the middle of the floor, closed my eyes, and focused. It didn't take long, as if the ghost had been waiting for me. I still couldn't catch more than phrases and glimpses. I told Derek this, then said, "I stopped taking the meds after you gave me that jar. But they must still be in my system." "Not medic," the ghost said. "Block." "What's blocked?" "Spell, ghosts, blocking. A spell to block ghosts." I guessed. That got Derek's attention and he shifted forward, arms uncrossing. "Did he say a spell's blocking him? What kind?" I was about to translate, but the ghost could obviously hear and answered. "Magic, ritual, important." "It's important." Not important," he said emphatically. I related this to Derek, who grumbled about the imperfection of this mode of communication as he furiously scratched his forearm, then said, "Tell him to say one word at a time. Repeat it until you get it and you say it back. It'll be slow, but at least we won't miss." He stopped, his gaze following mine to his forearm. His skin was moving, rippling. "What the?" he began, then growled in frustration and gave his arm a fierce shake. "Muscle spasms. I've been getting them a lot lately." He peered down at the rippling skin again, made a fist, and pumped his arm, trying to work it out. I was about to suggest he see a doctor, then realized that might not be so easy for someone like Derek. I could see now that it was his muscles, expanding and contracting on their own. A side effect of his condition, I guess, muscles developing in overdrive. Like the rest of him, slamming through puberty. "Just as long as you don't rip through your clothing and turn green," I said. "What?" His face scrunched up, then he got it. "The Incredible Hulk." "Ha ha. Incredibly stupid movie, more like." His rubbed his forearm. "Ignore me and get back to your ghost." The ghost had heard Derek's suggestion about taking it one word at a time, and that's what we did. It worked much better, though it felt a bit like charades, him saying a word over and over, and me excitedly repeating it when I finally understood. I started with questions about the ghost himself, and learned he was a necromancer. He'd been at the hospital when I'd been admitted. Something about stopping ghosts from harassing the mental patients, which I didn't really understand, but it wasn't important. Ghosts recognize necromancers, so he'd known that's what I was. Realizing that I didn't know what I was, he knew I needed help. But before he could make contact, they moved me. So he'd followed me to Lyle House. Only it was somehow blocked against ghosts. He thought it was a spell, though when Derek challenged that assumption, the ghost admitted that it could be anything from the construction materials to the geographic location. All he knew was that the only places he could make even partial contact with me were the basement and the attic. As for the bodies in the crawl space, he knew two things. 1. They'd been murdered. 2. They were supernaturals. Put those together and he was convinced their stories would be important. He couldn't get them himself because he couldn't contact the dead as easily as he could before he became one of them himself. But they were just skeletons and dried up flesh, Derek said. Like mummies. Whatever happened to them wouldn't have anything to do with us, here, now. Maybe, was the ghost's only answer. Maybe. Derek threw up his hands and started pacing. He muttered under his breath, but there was no anger in it, just frustration, trying to work through this problem and see a connection when he really should be in bed, nursing a fever. Samuel Lyle, the ghost communicated next. Original owner. Know him? I said I didn't and asked Derek. How would I know the guy who built this place 100 years ago? 60, the ghost said, and I relate it. Whatever. Derek resumed pacing. Does he even know what year this is? I could have pointed out that if the ghost knew how long ago the house had been built, he obviously knew the current year, but Derek was just grouching, his fever making it hard to concentrate on this puzzle. Supernatural, the ghost said. Lyle. Sorcerer. That made Derek stop when I relate it. The guy who built this place was a sorcerer. Dark magic. Alchemist. Experimented on supernaturals. A chill ran up my arms and I crossed them. You think that's how those people in the cellar died? This sorcerer, Lyle, experimented on them. How does he know so much about this guy? Derek said. He followed you here, didn't he? Everyone knew, the ghost replied. In Buffalo. All supernaturals knew where he lived and stayed away. Or didn't? Derek shook his head. I still don't see how any of this is connected to us. Maybe, the ghost replied. Maybe not. Need to ask. Derek hissed a curse and smacked his hand into the wall hard enough to make me wince. I walked over to him. Go to bed. You're probably right. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. A sorcerer built this place 60 years ago, there are supernaturals buried in the cellar, and now we're here, 3 supernatural kids. The group home is named after him. Is that significant? Or is it just named after the guy who built it? It seems too much to be a coincidence, but I'm just not getting the connection. I can do this. Go back. No, he's right. We need to ask. He shoved his hand up the back of his shirt, scratching. I feel like crap and it's making me cranky. But we need to do this. The ghost followed us into the crawl space. How do I avoid what I did earlier? I asked. Returning them to their bodies. Silence. I counted to 60, then said, Hello? Are you still there? Stay calm. Focus. But go easy. Soft. Your power. Too strong. My powers are too strong. I couldn't suppress a smile. I might not be certain I wanted these powers, but it was kind of cool to hear that I had more than the average necromancer. Like taking an IQ test and finding out you're smarter than you thought. Your age should never be able to. Silence. I waited patiently to catch the next word. And waited. Hello. He started again, word by word. Too soon. Too much. Too. A longer pause. Something's wrong, he said finally. Wrong. Derek crawled from the shadows, where he'd been silently watching. What's he saying? Something about my powers. That they're wrong. Too strong, the ghost said. Unnatural. Unnatural. I whispered. Derek's eyes blazed. Don't listen to him, Chloe. So you're powerful. Big deal. You're fine. Just take it slow. The ghost apologized. He gave a few more instructions, then said he'd watch from the other side, in case his presence had boosted my powers earlier. If I needed him, he'd come back. One last warning against trying too hard, and he was gone. 35. Derek returned to the shadows, leaving me alone, sitting cross-legged again, the flashlight lying in front of me. As much as I'd have liked to use it as a candle, pushing back the dark, I'd set it on its side, the beam directed at the spot where the bodies were buried in hopes that, if the ground so much as quivered, Derek would warn me before I raised the dead. To free the ghosts from their corpses, I'd used visualization, so I did that again. I imagined myself tugging the ghosts from the ether, drawing them out like a magician pulling an endless scarf from his sleeve. A few times I caught a flicker, only to have it vanish again. I kept working, slowly and steadily, resisting the urge to concentrate harder. What do you want? A woman's voice snapped, so close and so clear I grabbed the flashlight, certain one of the nurses had discovered us. Instead, I shone the beam on a woman dressed in a sweater set. Or that's what her top half was wearing. She was standing, her head brushing the low ceiling, meaning she was buried to mid-thigh under the dirt floor. She was maybe 30, with a blonde bob. Her sharp features were rigid with annoyance. Well, necromancer, what do you want? Tell her to leave us be, a man's voice whined from the darkness. I shone the beam in his direction but could make out only a faint form by the farthest wall. I just want to talk to you, I said. That much is obvious, the woman snapped. Calling and pulling and pestering until you drag us out against our will. I didn't mean. Can't leave well enough alone, can you? It wasn't enough to shove us back into our bodies. Do you know what that's like? Sitting down, enjoying a nice afternoon, and all of a sudden you're back in your corpse, buried, clawing your way to the surface, terrified you've been trapped by some demented necromancer looking for zombie slaves. I didn't mean. Oh, do you hear that, Michael? She didn't mean it. The woman moved toward me. So if I accidentally unleash a storm of hellfire on your head, it'll be all right, as long as I didn't really mean it. You have a power, little girl, and you'd better learn to use it properly before someone decides to teach you a lesson. Summon me again and I'll do it. She started to fade. Wait. I struggled to remember what Simon had called a female spellcaster a witch, right? What happened to you here? I was murdered, in case that isn't perfectly obvious. Was it because you're a witch? She surged back so fast I jumped. You mean, did I bring this on myself? And no. Samuel Lyle, the man who owned this house, did he kill you? Because you're a witch. Her lips curled in an ugly smile. I'm sure my being a witch added a little extra dash of pleasure for him. I should have known better than to trust a sorcerer, but I was a fool. A desperate fool. Sam Lyle promised us an easier life. That's what we all want, isn't it? Power without price. Sam Lyle was a seller of dreams. A snake oil salesman. Or a madman. That twist of a smile again. We could never figure out which, could we, Michael? A madman, came the whisper from the back. The things he did to us. Ah, but we were willing subjects. At least, in the beginning. You see, little girl, all scientific advancement requires experimentation, and experimentation requires subjects, and that's what Michael and I were. Lab rats sacrificed to the vision of a madman. What about me? She sneered. What about you? Does this have anything to do with me being here? Now? There are more of us. Supernaturals. In a group home. Are they experimenting on you? Tying you to beds and prodding you with electrical wires until you bite off your tongue? And no. And nothing like that. Then you count your blessings, little girl, and stop pestering us. Sam Lyle is dead, and if the fates are just rotting in a dimension. She started fading again. Wait. I need to know. Then find out. She surged back again. If you think you're here because of a dead sorcerer, then you're as mad as he was, but I don't have your answers. I'm a shade, not an oracle. Why are you brats here, where I died? How should I know? Why should I care? Am I in danger? Her lip twisted. You're a supernatural. You're always in danger. Mission accomplished, but nothing gained. Except more questions, I said as we brushed off our clothing in the laundry room. Now you can finally get back to bed. Derek shook his head. Doesn't matter. I won't sleep. Because of this? I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I wasn't sleeping before you got me up. He tugged off his shoe and dumped a trickle of dirt down the sink. This fever or whatever. It's making me edgy. Restless. As if on cue, his forearm muscles started twitching. Part of the problem is I'm not getting enough exercise. Tossing a ball around with Simon just doesn't cut it. I need more space. More activity. I think that's what's causing this. He rubbed harder at the rippling muscles. Could you ask for workout equipment? They seem pretty good about stuff like that. He slanted a look my way. You've seen my file. You really think they're going to buy me a set of dumbbells and a punching bag? He looked around the laundry room. You tired? After that? No. How about some fresh air? Get out, go for a walk. I laughed. Sure, if there wasn't the small matter of an alarm system standing in our way. He raked his hand through his hair, shaking out dirt he'd brushed from the crawl space ceiling. I know the code. What? You think I'm going to push Simon to leave and not know the security code? I can get us out, and we really should do a walk around, check out escape routes, hiding places. I don't get to go on many field trips, so I haven't gotten a look at the neighborhood. I crossed my arms. You can walk out anytime? Get that exercise you need? But you never have. He shifted his weight. Never thought of it. Of course you have. But there could be an alert when the alarm is turned off. Or a record of it being disabled. So you've never taken the chance. But now we should. If we get caught, well, everyone already thinks we're fooling around. We'd get in trouble for sneaking off, but not like Simon and I would if we were caught running away. He scratched his chin. That's a good idea. And it never crossed your mind. He said nothing. I sighed and headed for the stairs. Chloe, he said. Hold on. I glanced back. Coming. 36. 5 minutes later, we were walking down the sidewalk, the lights from Lyle House fading behind us. We circled the block and mapped out all routes from the house. We were in a section of Buffalo I didn't recognize, one filled with old houses on big lots, where you'd expect to find a Mercedes or Cadillac in every drive. But I could see why it didn't. The billowing smokestacks a few blocks to the east. After 2 blocks walking west, the light pollution ahead suggested a business district, which Derek confirmed. Like this neighborhood, it was older and decent enough, but not fancy. No pawn and porn shops, but no bistros and baristas either. On Simon's rare outings, he'd told Derek he'd seen lots of older, ordinary businesses with plenty of alleys and dark corners. When you get to that business area, Derek said, you'll be home free. If you can't go that way. He waved east, toward the factory. Go there. It's all industrial. I'm sure you'd find an abandoned warehouse or two, if Jan needed to hole up for a while. He looked around, scanning the neighborhood, nostrils flaring as he drank in the chill night air, probably a welcome relief from his fever. Will you remember all that? Can you say it again? Slower? Maybe write it out for me? With pictures. He scowled. I'm just checking, okay? It's important. If you're worried we can't handle it, there's an obvious solution. Come with us. Don't. I'm just saying. Well, don't. He walked faster, leaving me jogging to keep up. I could tell Simon was right. The subject was closed to discussion, but I couldn't help myself. Simon's worried about you. Yet. He stopped, turned, and spread his arms. Do I look okay to you? No, you look like a guy who should be in bed, nursing a fever, not prowling. I'm not prowling, he snapped, harsher than necessary. I mean, where am I? On the street, right? Blocks from Lyle House. No cop cars are ripping down the road after me. If anything goes wrong, I can get out. Do you really think Talbot and Van Dop could stop me? The question isn't whether you can escape. It's whether you will. He paused. While I was gratified to know he wasn't just going to tell me what I wanted to hear, I didn't like seeing how much thought the answer required. Simon had said he was afraid that if something went wrong, Derek might just let it. He'd already decided he belonged at Lyle House. Would he leave even if he was in danger? Or could he see only the danger he posed, or thought he did? Derek. He shoved his hands in his pockets. Yeah. Yeah, what? He yanked one hand out and scratched his arm, nails digging in until they left red marks. If I'm in danger, I'll get away and find you guys. Okay. Okay. I woke to see a figure on my bed and sat up, Liz's name on my lips. But it was Ray, leaning against the wall, knees up, eyes sparkling with amusement. Thought you saw a ghost, she said. And no. Maybe. I rubbed my eyes and yawned. I suppose it's not a good idea to surprise someone who sees spooks, hey. I peered around the bedroom, blinking hard. Early morning light poured in. I glanced at Ray's bed and pictured Liz there, toes wiggling in the sunlight. Did Liz leave anything behind? I asked. What? I pulled myself up, shoving the covers back. When you moved in, did you find anything? Just a shirt of Tori's. I didn't bother giving it back yet. Not like Tori's in any rush to return that green hoodie she borrowed from Liz. I saw her wearing it the other day. Why? Did Liz finally call? I stretched. No. I was just, another yawn. It's early and half my brain is still in dreamland. Did I miss Mrs. Talbot's knock? No, we have a few minutes yet. I wanted to talk to you before everyone got up. Sure, what's I jerked upright. Yesterday. We were supposed to talk. I totally forgot. You've been busy. She plucked at the hem of her baby doll nightdress. So am I going to get an invite? Invite? On the Great Escape. That's what you were going to talk to me about last night, right? What you and Simon and Derek have been scurrying around planning for the past few days. I don't want to imagine the look on my face at that moment. Shock, horror, disbelief. I'm sure it was all there, writ large enough to erase her doubts. I don't know what I'm talking about. She twisted a loose thread between her fingers and ripped it off, gaze fixed on it. So what were you going to tell me? Make up a story to throw me off the trail. And no. I was going to tell you what happened in the crawl space. With Derek. I contacted that ghost again. Oh. Her gaze dropped. As fascinating as my zombie story would normally have been, it wasn't what she'd been hoping to hear. She let the thread fall to the bed. So I'm not invited, am I? There's no. She held up her hands. I overheard Simon and Derek arguing about escaping once. Now, with all this talk of transferring you or Derek, and you guys suddenly hanging out together. It's not. Last night, I woke up and you were gone. I went downstairs just as you and Derek were sneaking in and I caught enough to know you weren't taking a moonlight stroll. Derek isn't running away. Which was true, if not exactly what she meant. She eased back against the wall again, drawing her knees up. What if I met the club requirement? Would that snag me an invite? What? Your club? The special kids? The ones with superpowers? I let out a laugh that sounded more like the yip of a startled poodle. Superpowers? I wish. My powers aren't winning me a slot on the Cartoon Network anytime soon, except as comic relief. Ghost Whisperer Jr. Or Ghost Screamer, more like. Tune in, every week, as Chloe Saunders runs screaming from yet another ghost looking for her help. Okay, superpower might be pushing it. But what if you could shove a kid out of your way with a flick of your fingers? Bet that would come in handy. I swung out of bed and walked to the dresser. Sure, but that's not what Derek did. He grabbed me. Believe me, I felt physical contact. I'm not talking about Derek. A few days before Brady got shipped out, he and Derek got into it. Or Brady was trying to. Derek wasn't having any of it, so Brady kept razzying him, trying to get a rise, and when he got in Derek's face, Simon flicked his fingers and, wham, Brady flew into the wall. I was there. Derek and Simon never touched him. That's why I wanted to see Simon's file. Well, as you saw, Simon doesn't have a file. He's here because of Derek. Their dad disappeared and Derek was sent here because of his problem, so they put Simon in the same place. How'd their dad disappear? I shrugged and pulled out a shirt. They haven't said much about it. I don't want to push. A thump. When I looked over my shoulder, Ray had thudded back onto the bed. You're too nice, girl, she said. I'd have been all over them for that story. I shook my head. I think I hear Mrs. Talbot. You don't. It's Saturday. We can sleep in, and you aren't getting off that easily. I know Simon's got some magic power, like you. And I'm pretty sure Derek does. That's why they're so tight. That's why Simon's dad took Derek in, I bet. I looked in the mirror and ran the brush through my hair. What makes me so sure of all this? Ray continued. Remember when I told you about my diagnosis? How it didn't fit? I didn't tell you the whole story. You didn't read my file, did you? I slowly turned, brush still raised. She went on. According to the report, I got into a fight with my mom and burned her with a lighter. Only I wasn't holding a lighter. I just grabbed her arm and gave her first-degree burns. Why didn't you tell you? She cut in. I was waiting until I knew you better. Until you'd believe me. But then you figured out you were seeing ghosts and I knew how it would sound. Like a little kid jealous cause his friends going to Disney World gotta show that he's special, too. And my power isn't like yours. I can't make it happen. It just does, when I get mad. Like with Tori. You did burn her, didn't you? She hugged my pillow to her chest. I think so. But where's the proof? She felt like she'd been burned and there was a red mark, but it wasn't like I set her shirt on fire. She grinned. As fun as that might be. So with my mom I lied and said I had been playing with a lighter and, when I went at her, I forgot I was still holding it. No one cared that there wasn't a lighter. They see what they want to see. Stick a label on it, medicate it, and, if you're lucky, it'll just go away. Only what we've got doesn't go away. My brain struggled to take it all in. I knew I should say something, but what? Admit? Deny? Ray rolled off the bed to her feet, twisted her long curls back, and held out her hand. When I didn't move, she said, elastics. Behind you. Right. I tossed her one. She wrapped it around her ponytail and headed for the door. Wait, I said. She shook her head. You gotta talk to the guys first. I don't. She turned to face me. Yes, you do. You should. Would you want them blabbing your secrets before checking with you? Talk to them. Then get back to me. Not like I'm going anywhere. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.